All right, guys, you'll know about when this video was recorded as I talk about the recently completed World Series. So, yeah, I know I'm like a couple, like a month or maybe a little bit more than that. I'm ahead of where these videos are being released. I was thinking a little bit about this today, actually, this morning while I was running, and I was thinking about some of the World Series teams that we've seen that end up being not the greatest teams of all time, teams that had records that were not exactly so wonderful. There's a certain team that comes directly to mind when we talk about this, but we'll talk about them in a second. I wanted to sort of walk through this with you. This has been a common refrain, especially in the wild card era, that you get a lot of teams that end up getting really, really hot during the regular season, and as a result are able to go to the World Series and win it, even though they're not technically like a really deserving team or whatever. So I was just thinking it would be interesting to look at teams that did not win 90 games in the regular season that ended up going to the World Series, and some teams that actually won it. So we're going to go take a look at that. We're going to look here at Pennant Winners today. This is Wikipedia. We're going to look at the National League, then the American League, and sort of remind ourselves about some of these teams. We're actually going to start with 1903. Because this is when the 154-game schedule starts. Actually, we'll start with 1904. And the reason why is because when you get under 154 games, it's harder to win 90, right? I mean, you'll get teams like the 1900 Brooklyn Superbas that were 82 and 54, but this doesn't, winning 82 games out of 136 is actually not really that bad. So probably not a team that qualifies for that. That also means that we'll skip on over 1918, and we'll skip over 1981 and 1994 naturally. We'll skip over stuff like that, 2020 as well. So as we move forward through the National League, we can see that we have the 26 Cardinals, who were kind of on the cusp, 89 and 25, 2 games above Cincinnati, as sort of the first team that qualifies as a team that was supposedly undeserving. It's a lot easier, of course, to say that they're deserving when you consider that the Cardinals actually won the World Series and that they won first place as well, right? Instead of being a second place team that was granted the ability to go to the World Series because the powers that be wanted more money for postseason television coverage. So you start off kind of with the 26 Cardinals, and then you have also the 38 Cubs. The 38 Cubs are famous because of the Homer and the Glowman, which is one of those old baseball stories that I think people have forgotten. I don't hear very much about that these days. If you were watching documentaries on baseball, say like in the 1980s, you would see a lot about this, and people would talk about this as sort of a legendary thing. It's kind of escaped the zeitgeist. It's probably too far away for most people to remember. The other team, this one surprised me, was the 59 Dodgers, who were 88 and 68. I was surprised to see that. I didn't know that the Dodgers won only 88 games in 1959. I actually always assumed that it was the White Sox in 59 that were kind of the weaker team. So there you go, just a couple of teams like that in the pre-division era. We'll look at the American League quickly. So this is the reason why we don't want to look at these earlier seasons, because these two White Sox teams and this Athletics team were probably better than this record indicates because they just didn't play that many games. So we're not going to worry too much about them. 1918, again, we skip it because there weren't enough games played. 1919, we could talk about the White Sox. This should be surprising to you because this is supposed to be one of those, legendary teams. Remember, though, they only played 140 games. But yeah, the Reds had a better record in 1919 than the White Sox. We'll have a lot more to say about the Black Sox scandal. There's a lot of stuff to say about that. We'll just scroll down here through this. 1944 Browns are one of the teams that will come up when you're talking about teams that maybe don't deserve to be remembered as pennant winners. I mean, because the all of baseball was kind of screwed up during the war, and the Browns were really a fluke team that won by a game over the Tigers. 45 Tigers, I guess, also. They actually won one game fewer than the Browns and won by a game and a half over Washington. But you don't hear necessarily so much about that Tiger team, which, of course, did go on to win the World Series over the Cubs. And that's it for the American League in terms of sort of teams with that sub-90 win total before the division era. Now, the truth is, as you're about to see, it's not the wild card that makes the difference here. It's the division era in general. And we'll see that with the National League almost right away, right? because there's one team here that stands out. This would be the 1973 Mets, who went to the World Series beating the Reds in 5 games, despite having the woeful record of 82 and 79. The 73 Mets, like, nobody talks about this team. Right, the 73 Mets is a team that, like, I don't hear people talk about. Everybody will talk about the 69 Mets. People who are smart, who know baseball history, will also talk about the 1970 Mets, who started off very well and had a good season. The 73 Mets barely won above a St. Louis Cardinals team that was at 500. It was a crazy division, and it was like nobody wanted to win. And it's an even crazier season when you look at sort of what happened in the game by game. I'm trying to see here. Sometimes Wikipedia will have that. I'm not seeing here, though, that they have the day by day. We're not going to worry too much about this as my dog goes nuts. We're not going to worry too much about that. But yeah, the Mets came within a game of winning the World Series with that record. That should have shown you something. Like I said, 81, we don't care about this. You see a bunch of teams that did win 90 plus. And then the next time you see a team that's anything like the 73 Mets is, I guess you could say, the 2005 Astros with their 89 and 73 record, right? They did win the LCS. I guess I'm not looking at the teams that lost the LCS, but even still, I mean, you can talk about like 70 Pirates or the 74 Pirates again. The NL East had some problems back then, or the 82 Braves. We're not going to worry about that too much, so we'll look just at the Pennant Winners and we'll focus on that. So yeah, the 2005 Cardinals, or the 2005 Astros were an interesting one, but then it's the 2006 Cardinals that kind of are up there in 73 Mets territory. They won 83, not 82, so they got one above them, but yeah, this is another team that kind of was surprising in the postseason. I will note, though, that they did win the division. This wasn't something that was wild card driven. We'd have to go back and look at the full standings for 2006 and come up with some sort of theoretical schedule to say, well, what if this, what if that, if there was no 3-division setup. Next, we have, of course, the Giants in 2014, who were 88 and 74. Lost the division by 6 games and yet managed to do well in the postseason. And this is around the time that people did start to complain a little bit, saying you only need to win enough games to get that far. And then here comes the big kicker. The big kicker is that over the last 3 years, the National League champions have all been teams that have not won 90 games. This is unusual, and we'll see as we look at the American League, this is not just unusual, it's really kind of unprecedented, but that's what we've been living with so far. Is that a huge problem or not? I mean, it sort of depends upon your point of view. You'll notice that 1, 2, 3 of these teams, they're all division winners. They're not wildcard teams either. So interesting to note. Now we'll go back here over to the American League, just take a look at this as well. Again, we'll focus only on the division winners. We ignore 1981, although that's a pretty poor winning percentage. You only win 59 games in the season, you win the World Series. How about that? The team, here they are. The team that I wanted to point out was the other famous team for this, which is the 87 Twins. Now, I know that the 2006 Cardinals won fewer games than the 87 Twins, but I mean, this was a team. I think this has to do with sort of what was happening that season, right? The Twins won a American League West that was filled with teams that really didn't want to win. It was kind of bunched up towards the center. 91 was like that in the American League West as well. The Tigers, in contrast, had this great pennant race with the Blue Jays that year that went down to the wire, down to the last series of the season when the Tigers won it. I think they won it on a Sunday night or Sunday afternoon baseball game on ABC. So kind of one of the last times that you had the real joys of the pennant race on network television before the ESPN era really kicked in 1990. And I think there was some resentment that the Blue Jays, that had an excellent team, ended up not going, and then the Tigers lost and folded to the Twins so quickly in 5 games. Sparky Anderson always said that the 87 Tigers were a better team than the 84 Tigers, I think that he actually has a good point if you start dissecting the team and doing a comparison. But for whatever reason, the Twins won. I know that they had, the air conditioning in the Metrodome, and that helped them in the first 2 games of the LCS, but they also won 2 in Detroit. It wasn't until the World Series that it gets a little bit dicey. So 73 Mets and the 87 Twins are kind of those teams that you focus on. There was the 97 Indians, which I always thought was a better team, but now they only had 86 wins that season. I remember this LCS like it was yesterday. In fact, if we look at it, I'll see if we have a list of the postseason games here. Yeah, see, here's your game log. See if they give us the postseason. Yeah, the game that I remember more than anything else is probably Game 3. I did watch Game 1, Game 6 as well, but Game 3 of this ALCS, I remember watching that. I think this was played on a Saturday, if memory serves well. This is one of the most incredible games I've ever seen, and was one of the highlights of my childhood. I was 13 at the time. So a little bit of personal nostalgia there. You go back here through, yeah, I mean, the 2012 Tigers won 88. I mean, they came close. But that's really about it, right? Oh, and 2014 Royals, right? They won 89 games. Again, you know, this is at a time when the Central was filled with teams that were not necessarily that dominant. But as I said, you know, the crazy thing that goes on here is that in the last 3 years, the National League pennant winners have been teams that haven't won 90 games, and we've never seen that in baseball history. I mean, the last time we've seen 3 in a row like that, you have to go back to 1900, 1901, and 1902, but they didn't play as many games back then. They played 100 and... I mean, is that not even 140? This is 135 games. This is 136, and this is also 136, right? And interesting, because they had 5 games unplayed, and they won the pennant by only 4. So I'm not sure why Ban Johnson made the decision he did to just stop there. Whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter. It's all academic now. But yeah, the last 3 years in the National League, you see the National League pennant winners have won fewer than 90 games. How about that? Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. Talk to you again tomorrow. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.